Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Well, welcome into a December 13th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Mike McKenna scratching like a cat at his just incredible collection of jerseys. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. We're getting set for 25 minutes of straight hockey talk. Mike, I know you watched the games last night and loved it. From a goaltending perspective, 6 games on the slate, only 20 combined goals. Well, 19 if you don't count the ones in the shootout. Unbelievable performance from the Tenders last night.
Call me kitty cat. Dude, you're spot on, man. I really was locked in last night watching Nashville and St. Louis, and that was a double shutout that went to overtime until Shen managed to score for St. Louis and take that victory 1-0. So it was a good day for the goalie union, Tyler, and we always appreciate a little bit of love on the Daily Faceoff Live show.
Yet it wasn't the biggest story around the league. So let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock and start with the rash of injuries we saw around the league last night. In Calgary, you had Mackenzie Weegar missing the game with a non-COVID illness, and Elias Lindholm did not play because of injury. You had Cole Caulfield leaving the game for the Montreal Canadiens. He went down with what they're calling an upper body injury. He got steamrolled in that hockey game right in front of his own net. Tim Stützle, he went down for the Ottawa Senators as well. Jack Eichel has been placed on IR. Mike, so many injuries around the league. Which team are you looking at right now and going, whoa, that situation, that's the most concerning?
Yeah, Colorado's probably the obvious one because they're missing a lot of bodies, but I do have some concerns with Vegas right now. I mean, the team's 5-5 in their last 10, and they haven't been bad, but they're just in a really grueling stretch of hockey where they're played 12 games in 23 days leading up to the holiday break at Christmas time. And anytime that your club is missing your 2 best players in each division, you know what I mean? By saying they're missing their best player in Eichel as a forward. Alex Pietrangelo is out indefinitely due to a family illness. And, first off, hoping everything turns out okay there for Petro and his family more than anything else. But the reality is on the ice, the Golden Knights are missing their top defenseman. So that's first and foremost. And then you go a little deeper. You got Zach Whitecloud out, who's a mainstay defenseman, penalty killer for that club. Even Brett Howden as a depth forward. And you just start to wonder, the team's looked a little bit different. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games, or played 3 of the last 4 games without Eichel. And it's just a different dynamic for that club. And especially how weighted they are between big contracts and the smaller contracts with Petro and Eichel out. I want to see how Vegas gets through this next stretch, especially in December, and hopefully get people back into their lineup. But as you know, Tyler, there's no shortage around the league. There are plenty of teams out there that are hurting right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of teams, and the one that I'm looking at with kind of a raised eyebrow is the situation in Calgary. And it's not bad yet because we don't know what's going on with Lindholm, and Weegar is just sick, so that's obviously not going to be a long-term thing. But Chris Tanev also could be hitting the shelf here, and I look at that and go, for a team in Calgary who I didn't love their depth to begin with, and if you're suddenly missing Tanev, and we saw in the playoffs last year how much missing a guy like Chris Tanev hurt their blue line. And if you're going to be missing Lindholm for any considerable stretch of time, like at least with Vegas, Mike, they had that hot start and they can sit on that a little bit. If you were to have a rough 10 to 12 games because of injury, you're going to be fine. You're probably still going to be leading the Pacific. If the Flames have a rough 10 to 12 games because of injury, oh boy, that could be a problem.
Yeah, it could be the season. I mean, we even saw Nazem Kadri leave the game for a little bit last night. So I agree with you with Calgary, especially. It's a worry. Vegas, you hope it's a bump in the road. But again, whenever you get that kind of split with your contracts between the big dogs and the little guys, boy, you miss a couple of the big dogs and things change dramatically. So lots to play out in the Pacific, especially on the Western Conference of the NHL.
On a personal perspective, you wonder about Tim Stützle as well, and you're hoping that's nothing serious. But that's a guy who throughout his career, as you get a look here on the screen at the injury, upper body, they're saying shoulder, some are saying elbow. That's a guy who throughout his career has battled a lot of injuries. He's only been in the league for a couple of seasons, and as you can see here, there's starting to rack up. So you certainly hope a guy as talented as Stützle isn't fighting too much of an injury bug going forward. But let's move along to the Board of Governors meeting in the NHL. We obviously had Frank Saravalli on the show yesterday. Gary Bettman speaking right now as we're live, and Frank sending out an update on the big thing that everyone's wondering, and that would be the salary cap. Frank saying Gary Bettman The NHL now projecting a $70 million remaining escrow balance at the end of the season, which would result in the salary cap rising by just $1 million this summer to $83.5 million. Bettman not willing to say whether a negotiation with the PA for a larger increase is possible. And we'd heard this. It was if the players pay off the debt quickly, the cap could go up by $4.5 million or up to $4.5 million. If the debt is not paid off in full, it was only going to go up by $1 million. This is substantial news, Mike, because I'm sure there are a lot of general managers reading this tweet from Mr. Saravalli and going, boy, my next summer is going to be a whole heck of a lot more stressful if this thing doesn't go up by that full 4.5.
That's because what we were expecting. Wow, we're going to get this big
Yeah.
bump. And now all of a sudden, so if you've had your eye on a big free agent signing this next summer, you may have to completely circle the wagons as an NHL GM and figure out a different course of action. But I don't think anybody should really be too caught off guard by this, Tyler. I mean, you're asking the players to potentially pay down that escrow in advance, and it would take some further negotiation. So I'm not surprised by this, especially the NHL being kind of as conservative as it's been previously to stay the course and make sure things go well. And what was interesting I took yesterday out of those meetings, Tyler, was that it was Gary Bettman's 30th anniversary in the big chair since he was elected commissioner of the National Hockey League. Do you know how old he was when he was elected, Tyler? Take a guess.
I would have been 45, maybe? No.
He was 40.
How close am I?
Okay, 40.
Okay.
I'm 39. Like, could you imagine me running the NHL? I can't.
No.
Like that's great. It's amazing to think, and the longevity that Bettman's had. Like there's been moments that, of course, have driven people crazy. 3 lockouts. I think the handling concussions left a bad taste in players' mouths. But there's been things too that have really progressed his career in the NHL. And for me, one of the key things was July 10th when they extended this CBA that we're just talking about. They got it through the 2025-26 season. It got everything through COVID. I think that was a monumental undertaking that when we look back at Bettman's tenure, we'll say, man, they really managed to handle COVID well. They got the bubbles in, they got the season done, and they were able to create some peace in the labor market, for the foreseeable future, clear until 2026.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another thing that's kind of a black cloud on Bettman would be Olympic participation. And that's something that Bill Daley touched on at the Board of Governors meeting, saying the next World Cup is scheduled for 2025, shortly ahead of the 2026 Winter Games. He said it's not problematic for them from a scheduling standpoint to do those in back-to-back. He added a little bit of extra context, saying the PA has been clear that players are not going if they don't get what they've normally gotten in relation to terms and conditions with things such as insurance and travel costs as well. There was an Ottawa Senators update that they are starting to reach the stage of prospective buyers looking into the Senators' finances as well. If you want more on the Board of Governors meeting, Frank Saravalli has one recap up on the site, and he'll have another one up shortly. So head to dailyfaceoff.com. Sticking in the topic of off-ice conversations, multiple reports out of Vancouver that the team tabled their captain, Bo Horvat, a contract, and Bo Horvat promptly rejected that contract, and that is leading to a lot of speculation that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin are going to be forced to turn their attention to trading number 53. He's having an incredible season. He's got a $5.5 million cap hit. He's a UFA at the end of the year. If Horvat is indeed on the market, he is immediately the premier rental piece around the NHL. A centerman, kills penalties, produces offense, can do so much for you, and feels like a guy who would only get better as a playoff run gets longer and longer. As we look around the league at potential contenders, Mike, who do you see as a GM who should be licking his chops at the chance to get Horvat in his lineup?
Well, I think the Wild would. I also think the Islanders would be a really good fit. Horvat really seems like a Lou Lamoriello type of player. And he can play center, wing. He's versatile. And I could even see that being a trade, and then Lou tries to extend him like he did previously with even JG Pageau and other deadline pickups. But my biggest one's the Hurricanes. They need help down the middle. Jesper Kotkaniemi hasn't been able to grab a number 2 role. Their power play's awful, 27th in the league. Bo Horvat has 8 power play goals. Like, if you want an instant shot in the arm, Bo Horvat's going to do that for the Carolina Hurricanes power play. They also have Max Pacioretty coming back. That's a very different looking team if they could pull off Horvat and Pacioretty in the lineup. It thinks to me it'd just be a matter of what they'd have to give up. Maybe some defensive prospects. They have a couple of those. Scott Morrow, Alexander Nikishin could all be maybe somebody that would be enticing to the Vancouver Canucks. But for me, that's it. I think Carolina would be a great fit. I'd really like Horvat in that sweater. How about you, Tyler?
For me, I'm looking in the Western Conference, and I'm eyeing up the Colorado Avalanche. That's a team that lost Nazem Kadri over the offseason, and for me, Horvat would be a pretty darn good replacement there. And if you're Vancouver, yeah, you want some future assets, and Colorado does still have their first-round pick for the upcoming season. But what about adding a piece that could maybe benefit from a change of scenery and could help you a little bit quicker than maybe a draft pick? And I'm looking at, and this would help with the salaries as well. What about Sam Girard as a target for the Vancouver Canucks? That's a guy who the Avs might have to move off their blue line for salary reasons if they want to bring in an impactful forward piece like Bo Horvat. So I threw on my armchair GM EA Sports NHL mode hat, Mike. Sam Girard
I
and a
like
first
that.
round pick for Bo Horvat and Luke Shen. To me, that's a deal
Oh
where
boy.
Vancouver, yes, you get the first round pick. That'll somewhat help you. But Girard, he's in your lineup. You need D-men. And from Colorado's perspective, you replace Girard with a more rugged shutdown guy, fits your style more, and you get Bo Horvat and the salaries work.
Man, that's a big swing. If that happens, you definitely deserve a
Mm-hmm.
nice gift card from DoorDash. I'd have to say that would be the appropriate thing to happen for you.
Throughout the first couple months of the season, we've been taking a look at a few different individual awards, and the one we haven't really dug into is the Jack Adams, and we're going to do that now. There are a lot of options. It feels like in past years, there's always just kind of been one or two that grab hold of the race early, and it's like, okay, these guys, their teams are off to great starts. They're probably going to be in the conversation at the end of the year. This year, honestly, I think you can go in every division and find one or two coaches who are just doing some great things this year. I look at the way even a guy like Mike Sullivan has taken the Penguins from their slow start with all their injuries and found a way to keep their heads above water. But when you look around the league, Mike, who's someone that stands out to you as a potential early Jack Adams favorite?
The easy answer is Jim Montgomery, and I think he'd be very worthy of it as the Boston Bruins head coach. There was just so many question marks surrounding that team, especially with health at the start of the year. Marchand was out, McAvoy. They're now back in the lineup, and it didn't miss a beat there in Boston. But it was largely the same team as Bruce Cassidy had last year. Of course, there's little tweaks, especially with David Krejci back, but I think that's just a reinvigorated club that's playing faster and better than I've ever seen. I think a big credit to that is Montgomery. But Tyler, I got to give a mask tip to Rick Bowness and Pete DeBoer out in the Central. I mean, I didn't even have the Jets as a playoff team, and here they are leading the Central. I did think that, pat myself on the back, I thought that the Dallas Stars would be second in the
Yep.
Central this year. That's where they are right now under Pete DeBoer. So those are the ones I really have my eye on. I think Montgomery might be a front runner, but man, Jets keep it up. Rick Bowness deserves a lot of love.
Yeah, I mean, Winnipeg and Dallas. You nailed Dallas. A lot of people had Winnipeg. Well, I had both those teams outside of the playoff picture, quite frankly, in the Central. And the work that Bonus and DeBoer done has been incredible. Bruce Cassidy in Vegas, you mentioned him. They are leading the way in the Pacific. I'm going to go to the East, though, for my pick, and I'm going to look at the New Jersey Devils. I mean, how many people had this team as even being a group that could contend for a playoff spot? I think everyone thought they could maybe take a step forward. And granted, a big part of this has been goaltending with a guy like Vitek Vanacek being as solid as he's been. But for me, my prediction at the beginning of the year was that Lindy Ruff was going to be the first coach fired. So I feel like I kind of owe it to him to pick him as my early season Jack Adams favorite. You think of that long winning streak, the fact they're 21-5-2 on the year as well. And I mean, the Devils fans as well. I think that's been one of the best moments of the year. They boo Ruff in the first home game. They have the sorry Lindy chant just a few weeks later as the team was on
Sorry,
the heater of all heaters.
Lindy.
It was great, right? And I don't know,
Sorry, Lindy.
I feel like what he's done there, and again, they're missing a guy like Andre Palat, too. Like, they've fought through injuries. The way the Devils are playing to be leading the Metro, a tough division, by the margin that they're leading it, Ruff deserves a lot of love for that.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I feel like this is the closest class we've seen in quite a while.
Yeah.
The last 2/3 of the season is really going to dictate. I think it may even come down to that last third, who's in playoffs, who finishes off the year strong.
Yeah, 100%. It is 12 days till Christmas, 13 days until Boxing Day, which means the World Juniors are just around the corner. Let's dig into things with Stephen Ellis in the next wave. Always a pleasure to welcome in Stephen Ellis for the next wave, delivered by our friends at DoorDash. And Stephen, yesterday, Team Canada named their final roster for the upcoming World Junior Hockey Championships in Halifax. And let's start with the easy kind of cliche question. The biggest surprise cuts, in your opinion?
Well, for me, it goes to Carson Lambos, who was on that team in the summer, and he only played the one game, but I thought he still looked great this season. And this seemed like a guy that was going to step into a top four, maybe even a top pairing role, where he could play a bit physical, but he's a good puck mover, and he could kind of set guys up really well. So to have him cut, that seemed like a big surprise. But this is a Canadian defense core that I think is going to be really physical. So for that alone, it's going to be, I think, one where, okay, well, they're really big. There's a couple 6'4" guys, a couple 6'5" guys, and it feels like they're not too confident in their goaltending, and maybe they just need this more physical shutdown defense to kind of make that work. And it's a shame because Lambos is a fantastic defenseman, but I think that they made their choice.
I think going into camp, there's a lot of competition, especially at center ice. World Juniors is always like that. There's plenty of names to choose from, but you got to have a strong spine. And, I looked around, look at this lineup, and to me, that might be one of the surprising areas is the four that were chosen right down the middle. So how about for you, Stephen? Who's the biggest surprise to make this club?
For me, it's Caden Bankier for the Kamloops Blazers. And this is a guy that he had 60 points last year, which is good. That's what you expect. But he was an overage prospect, so I don't think anyone kind of thought anything too much of it. He was playing on a team that had a lot of scoring to begin with. But for him this year, he's been on an absolute roll. He's a Minnesota Wild prospect. He's got 33 points in 24 games, and he's got almost a goal per game. So this is someone who really had to work his way into the lineup because he never played for Canada in the past in any other event, so he wasn't really on their radar. And he was a bit of a late bloomer, and I think maybe losing that season to COVID didn't help. But going out there and making an impact at this camp, the one thing scouts will say about him is he's one of the hardest working players you'll see as a prospect right now, and he's had to prove people wrong a lot. So for him to fight his way onto this lineup as a centerman, I think he'll probably play on the wing. But this team has so much center depth, and there were some pretty talented guys that were let off. So I think that's a pretty big decision there by Canada to bring him.
It almost feels like a part of the World Junior holiday tradition here in Canada, Stephen, is looking at the goaltending for Team Canada and kind of gulping and going, oh boy, how are they going to find a way to get through this? Because it's almost consistently the biggest weakness on the team. How do you feel about the Canadian goaltending heading into this tournament?
Well, you just kind of have to be good enough. And I think Canada's got that pat. Ben Goujo was fantastic at the U18s a couple of years ago, and maybe not the greatest stats in the world, but it's like he made the big saves when it mattered, and it wasn't his fault that his team would allow 9 or 10 shots a game. They were just that good that year. But I think he's one of the better goalie prospects. Someone that I think is going to really get people to notice him at this tournament, but he will have a short leash if he ends up starting because Thomas Milik was he's almost had a perfect record this year. He's playing on a good team out in the WHL. I think the thing here is you're looking at one goalie who's a little bit bigger, and that's Goudreau, and bigger goalies definitely have a bit more success in this tournament outside of it was Devin Levi, who seemed to kind of ignore that narrative altogether. But it's something where Milik has been at with Canada in the past other tournaments, but he's been a backup, and Goudreau has been a starter. So I think we're going to see Goudreau, Milik in that order, but I think it's mostly interesting they didn't bring a third goalie. They had room for a 23rd roster spot they could have used on a goalie, and they elected to go with 2. That's always risky.
Yeah, no kidding, especially heading into a tournament where it just seems like weird things always find a way to happen. That is a little risky. I appreciate the insight. As always, Stephen, the next wave delivered by DoorDash, where you can use the promo code GameDay25, get yourself 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app. Chat with you next week. Wait, no, you're on the show tomorrow hosting. Chat with you tomorrow, Stephen.
See you tomorrow.
Moving along to the daily Faceoff inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. If you think back to yesterday with Frank Saravalli, he mentioned that maybe there were a few people lurking around the Board of Governors meeting wondering, is it time for the NHL to look into changing up their playoff format in a similar way that the NBA did? So the question, point blank, Mike, would you be in favor of a playoff format change?
No, man, it should be hard to make playoffs. Half the teams already make it. How many more? Like, you don't deserve to play for the Stanley Cup unless you're one of the top 16 teams during the 82-game regular season. You have 82 games to make it, Tyler. I think it's cut and dried. But I could be convinced if all that extra revenue could help fund lifetime health care for the alumni, I'm all in. You can put as many clubs in as you want, but I don't see that happening. So I think we're stuck at 16. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I like 16. Like 16 of 32. It is just a nice, even number. The top half get a chance to play for the trophy. The other half go home early. I just think it's so easy. And sometimes you're just creating. And actually, you know what? Here, I'll share with you this quote from Gary Bettman today when he was asked about this. He said, "You're looking to fix a problem that doesn't exist." The first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs is unbelievable. It's the best action, I would say, on the sports calendar. Opinion might be a little biased, but that's what I believe. And when you look at the NBA, they are trying to fix a problem. The first round of their playoffs is typically boring. A lot of sweeps, a lot of quick series. In the NHL, it's the best. And I don't want to see the NHL, in Bettman's words, try to fix a problem that doesn't exist. I'm going to hit you with a little bonus question here. It comes in from Darcy in our YouTube chat, who asked if you're surprised that there haven't been any major trades yet this season. What's your take on that?
I think it's still a little bit early with the cap world. It's made everything really difficult. I do expect when the NHL comes back from holiday break, I think by New Year's, I think we're going to see our first big move by, let's say, the first week of January. That'd be my best guess.
Yeah, and Prescott agreed with you in the chat. He said there's lots of teams up against the cap right now. No one has any space to wiggle. Also, it's been a really, really tight race. Like, there's way more teams. Last year, we talked about this yesterday. Last year, by this point, we knew who the 8 playoff teams were in the East. It was easy for teams to identify themselves as a buyer or a seller. A lot of teams right now stuck in that sort of purgatory in the middle. So I do think we'll have to wait a little bit longer for some major trades to break. Let's move along to our daily bet segment brought to you by Pointsbet. Canada went 2-1 last night, missed on the over because, well, none of the games hit the over. But I did nail both my shot props. So let's keep it rolling with 3 bets for tonight, starting with a matchup between the Oilers and the Predators. Leon Draisaitl has earned the nickname the Mayor of Smashville because all he does is dominate the Nashville Predators. In the last 3 seasons, he's faced off against them 7 times. He has 14 goals and 7 assists. That is not a mistake. He is averaging 2 goals and an assist every game over the last 3 years against the Predators, and you can get him at plus 115 to go over just 1.5 tonight. I'm all over Draisaitl continuing his dominance of the Preds. The Jets are minus 135 on the money line against the Golden Knights. We talked about the Golden Knights and just how banged up they are, Mike, so I like taking Winnipeg in this hockey game. Been a decent home team so far this year. This is a game where Connor Hellebuck should start, and once I see him as confirmed on Daily Faceoff, I am laying a wager on the Jets money line at minus 135. And finally, to wrap things up, I'm heading out to the Sabres and Kings matchup, where it very well could be Craig Anderson against Phoenix Copley. And we talked yesterday about how Copley is on a nice little run, but I still like the over in this game. The line is moving towards the over as well. If you bet it earlier this morning, you would have gotten it around minus 120. It's now minus 140. Regardless, good spot. The over's hit in 4 of the last 5 for the Sabres, 8 of the last 10 for them as well. For the Kings, it's only hit in 2 of the last 5, but in every game where it's been missing, the total's been at 5 or 6 goals. So they haven't been these low-scoring 2-1, 3-1 games. There have been goals, and against Buffalo tonight, who's just been an over machine, I like this total to go over 6.5. So those are my 3 plays for this evening, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. Check them out if you're in Ontario. And now we will wrap up with a little garbage time. Mike, what do you got?
Well, it turns out that hockey is truly for everyone, even football players, because look at this. We've got Eli Manning of NFL fame, who I believe lives in the New Jersey area. I want to say, I'm not sure of that. His daughter, Caroline, on the ice as a goaltender. Can you believe it? This is actually terrible. Get her out of the net, Eli. Don't let her do this again. This is going to be horrible for you. I'm living this reality right now with 2 kids, both my daughters wanting to play goaltender. I actually love this. This is so cool. And this is something that USA Hockey does in conjunction with Pure Hockey. They provide quick change goalie equipment to youth organizations so that kids can try goaltender. It's great. It's fast. The coaches can put it on their kids really quickly. But here's the only problem, and I tweeted this. The way Caroline Manning is holding that stick, she wants to be a full right goalie. I can tell. She wants to be right-handed. And the only gloves in the bag with this quick change set are the blocker on the right hand, glove on the left. Please provide both. I know it's an extra cost. I get that. But we get so many kids that when they get older, have the glove on the same hand that they catch a baseball with, and they're shooting the opposite direction of how they would as a normal player. Yeah. And it hampers them. You look at all the best puck handling goalies, most of the goalies really in the NHL, Jake Allen, Marc-Andre Fleury, Carey Price, those guys that could really fire it, They shoot left-handed as a player and as a goalie. I shot right-handed as a player and as a goalie. So just a little side piece there, a little side note that I would say for this, but this is really cool. It's fun to see somebody from another sport being this involved in hockey and their kids enjoying it, and give it a go, Caroline. Just the puck hurts. Best of luck, I'll say. You're going to drive your parents crazy in the future if you stick with this.
I do love that idea of providing some quick change gear, because you always hear the biggest barrier into playing that position is the cost of it. So if organizations could do a little bit to help that, it's only going to be better for the sport going forward. Fantastic stuff from you, Mr. McKenna. Shout out to everyone who was in the YouTube chat. That was one of our busiest days there. You guys were fantastic. That's going to be a wrap on today's show. Look forward to chatting with everyone once again, noon Eastern tomorrow. In the meantime, keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and enjoy a full Tuesday night of NHL hockey.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.